I got started when I was 13.
I was really young, and the people that fought me were people that were looking for, child fetishes.
There was like 15 of them in a room, and I was really scared.
He cut me with a knife to be able to penetrate me. I was only 5.
I was crying because I was scared, and he had sex with me, and that was my first time. I still had on my school uniform.
Men who come here to abuse children in Cambodia have 99.9% of the time already abused children in their own countries.
White girl, white shorts that we were all taking hits on. She's like scared out of her mind. She looks kind of young. Like she's afraid to actually go through it.
All right, Brian, we got her.
We as a nation are going to have to sit back, take a deep breath, and realize, oh my God, this is in our neighborhoods, in our families, in our communities. It's right under our noses.
We frequently see drugs and psychological brainwashing become part of the process of keeping them committed to the offender.
Men will actually fly into Atlanta, get on the internet, say I want a boy who has no hair on his head, no hair anywhere, I want him to look like he's 13, I want him to be no taller than 5'2", order it, show up here, have sex, and be gone.
She touched my arm and smiled.
The sexual exploitation of children has become a cottage industry, driven by the internet.
It's very difficult for us to define the problem of child pornography to the American public because it's something we obviously can't show them.
There are some of the acts that I couldn't even describe to you, against children so young that no normal person could look at that without being disturbed.
It ain't about sex. It just be about business, that's it. Once you get them to go the first time, then you got a better chance of getting them to keep going.
I was really nervous, and I was really scared, and he was holding his gun and shot me.
Cannot arrest 11, 12, and 13-year-olds and charge them with prostitution. You cannot criminalize children.
I think people view the prostitution like a victimless crime. Most of the girls that we come across nowadays are 13, 14, 15 years old. I know these girls didn't wake up one morning and say, I want to be a prostitute today.
There are millions and millions of photos of children who are being sexually abused. Nobody knows who these children are.
And it raises the question to us, are there that many pedophiles out there? Or is something else happening?
In all the things you say.
Film clip is a rallying cry to that as it relates to the 16th Sustainable Development Goal's second target, to end trafficking and exploitation. I can't imagine seeing that and not wanting to give our attention to this issue. And I want to thank each of you from the depth of my heart for overcoming jet lag and all the things you did to be here this morning to give 90 minutes of your attention to this issue. My name is Sheva Carr, and I am here as the co-vice president of a UN peace messenger organization called Pathways to Peace. And everyone on our panel delegation is a delegate of Pathways to Peace, because human trafficking and the sex trafficking of children and women is a fundamental violation of our inalienable human rights. And we cannot create a peaceful and just world, as is the goal of Sustainable Development Goal 16, without addressing this issue. So what will it take to address this issue? I have to tell you, as panelists, we are coming to you with great humility today. There is no way that we can address such a complex, convoluted issue in 90 minutes. And if any of us really knew the answer to this question, what will it take to end human trafficking, then it wouldn't be happening. But we're here to start a profound conversation and to do what we can with what we do know and offer that into a dialogue with you and what you know, so that together we can begin to end this scourge that ex-president and humanitarian Jimmy Carter has called the greatest human rights violation in the history of humanity. And this can be a heavy subject, but we are bringing a light heart of hope to it. Thanks to a very dear friend who just surprised me by walking in, but she's the surprise later. What we have uncovered in our research is that media is part of the problem. Media is part of the poison that is perpetuating human trafficking, but it has the extraordinary potential to be the antidote. And when we say media, we mean all media. Print media, television, film, movies, video games, online media, posters, billboards. Everywhere we look, our brains are being influenced and our hearts are being influenced by information. And in our investigation, we have seen that media is perpetuating the problem in profound and dangerously unnoticed ways. And that media has the tremendous potential. And here among our panelists, in some cases, the astonishingly realized potential to be the antidote. And we're very excited to share that hope with you today. So I'm going to start on a note of hope and say that even mainstream media is beginning to get involved in this. There is the CNN.com Freedom Project, which 2 journalists at CNN started. And it is an extraordinary resource of personal stories about human trafficking that take the 21 million, which is a figure that none of us know is accurate. But we think 21 million trafficked persons in this world, and already there's disagreement because we have no accurate data on this. The infinite number of souls, devastating number of souls, let's say that, who are being trafficked, and making their stories personal so that they're not just lost numbers, but are touching the hearts of mainstream audiences. Another success story is Half the Sky. How many of you have read or heard of Half the Sky? Yes. The hands up in this room is a success story, a Pulitzer Prize-winning book, also by a journalist. And this one is more interesting to me in some ways because it is an example of what we're now calling in the media industry transmedia. So Half the Sky became a PBS documentary, and now it's become an interactive game, a video game. So it's reaching the engagement of audiences where they engage. And we'll be talking about the potential transmedia has to play an uplifting in this today. But there are also incredible grassroots efforts happening, not just CNN. And that's what we're here as panelists to share with you, the impact that we can have. You know, we're living in an unprecedented time when almost anyone, including a street child I work with in Nicaragua who doesn't have shoes but has a cell phone, can be a media creator. And I want to turn my attention today to some of my media heroes, and forgive me if I cry, because I am so blessed to be introducing you to Libby Spears and Nishima Chudasama, the creators of the film clip that you just saw, which was one of the primary influences in my life that got me off the couch and involved in making a difference for this issue. Welcome, Nishima and Libby.
As a filmmaker, I am drawn to stories that are often overlooked. In 2005, I started filming Playground in Indonesia, and Suni was one of the first victims I interviewed. At age 12, she was sold to a brothel by her best friend, a brothel where 600 other women and girls had also been sold. Unfortunately, Suni's story was only one of hundreds that I filmed while filming throughout Southeast Asia. I returned to the United States and came across a piece in the New York Times Magazine that Peter Landesman had written about girls that were being trafficked from Mexico into California to service the agricultural workers in the strawberry fields. And I thought this would be a good ending to this film. It talked about trafficking overseas, a way in which we can bring the story home. I went to DC and I met with Ernie Allen, the founder of the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. And I referenced the story to Ernie and said, I'm looking for other stories to tell that are similar to this, to make Americans care about what's happening overseas. And Ernie's response was, I don't know of any other stories of kids being brought into America, because you don't have to bring children into America to sexually exploit them. But I can tell you thousands of stories of kids that are being trafficked every day in their communities, in their cities, and across state lines. But I basically asked Ernie, where is this happening? He said it's happening anywhere. Wherever drugs are being sold, children are being sold. And I really wish you would tell this story. So this was probably in 2006, 2007, and there were a lot of other people that were talking in the media, other filmmakers that were making films about international trafficking. So for me, it felt important to tell that American story. So I chose Portland, Oregon as my first location, for no other reason than the fact that I was broke after 2 years of filming and I had a free place to stay in Portland. But within 24 hours of being there, I picked up the local paper and there was a follow-up story about an 11-year-old girl named Michelle, which you saw in the clip earlier, who had been trafficked from a mall in Portland, Oregon to Vancouver, British Columbia. But as I investigated further, I learned that trafficking doesn't happen in a vacuum. Prior to Michelle being trafficked, she was taken from her home at the age of 5 because she was in an abusive home and put into the state's care. She was put into 36 placements between the ages of 5 and the ages of 12. And within those homes, we know of 6 that she was sexually abused in. I was shocked to see firsthand that children were being trafficked in our own backyards. But what was most shocking to me is the perception of how Americans perceive victims. When I talked about Suni and other girls I interviewed in Southeast Asia about what happened to them and them being victims, people recognized these girls as being victims. But when I talked about Michelle, she was seen as a bad kid who made bad choices, not as a victim. My goal for the film became clear. In order to have a meaningful impact on the issue, I had to humanize the facts and create connections beyond the headlines by showing that Michelle and others like her were in fact victims just like Suni. And if the film could change public perception, laws would follow and resources would be unlocked. We would then have the capacity to address all of the systems that had failed Michelle. To a certain degree, this proved to be true. The story became a powerful call to action. Playground became a tool that could help transform the way American victims of trafficking were treated and perceived. The film was screened in communities around the world. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children hosted a screening in Dallas for 800 police officers. And at the end of the screening, there was a line outside of the door with, I would say, around 100 men in law enforcement coming up to me and apologizing and saying, I didn't know that I've arrested these girls in the streets. I didn't realize they were victims. They understood that the girls they had been criminalizing were in fact victims and they needed to be treated as such. We also used Playground to help change legislation. One of the first screenings of the film was held at the home of Senator Boxer, where several senators, including Ron Wyden, attended. That screening prompted Senator Wyden to sponsor federal legislation. All throughout, people connected with Michelle's story and were able to empathize with her vulnerability. It's this empathy that began to help change frontline responses and encourage public demand for laws that protect victims instead of criminalizing them. I founded the Nest Foundation to manage the awareness building we knew was possible through the film, the most important element of which is youth education. And I now want to introduce my colleague, Nishima Chudasama, who heads our youth education.
So our youth education program, has really been where we put a lot of attention with Nest's work currently. Just building, in fact, on a lot of the community screenings and the trainings we had. So often we would get requests from folks in the audience, just like you saying, you've created this incredible tool, how do we get into high schools? And so we rallied the call, especially because for us, engaging this younger generation in an issue that's quite frankly affecting them the most is one of the things that we wanted to contribute. When we talk about bringing Playground into the classroom, many of you looking at viewing that clip and how intense it can be, may kind of have a note of concern, but actually we've kind of used our time in the classroom to make sure that we're presenting the information in a way that gives young folks the vocabulary, the critical thinking skills, the framework with which they can really understand what makes trafficking thrive, why this is happening. And we want to make sure that young people are feeling empowered, they're feeling savvy, and that they're feeling, if we take a broader step out, as like they are actively participating in shaping their culture. As Sheva has said, media can so often contribute in, whether it's tacitly or often overtly, in creating an environment that normalizes rape culture, that normalizes misogyny, that hijacks masculinity and defines it in very, very one-dimensional ways. And so, after kind of using the first few lessons to really impart prevention strategies around, identifying what is grooming, what does that look like online, what does that look like offline, talking about bystander behavior, talking about sexting even, things that we may not necessarily immediately connect with trafficking, but in fact create vulnerabilities that can often lead to forms of exploitation for young people. So we're kind of giving, all these disparate elements this larger context. And by the fifth lesson, when we screen this video, which I will spare you all, I don't know if any of you remember this song from a couple of summers ago, Blurred Lines. It's very catchy. But once you listen to the lyrics, it's basically referencing date rape. And some of the images in it are, there's a guy kind of blowing smoke in a model's face. It's not only presenting women as objects, but it's also kind of defining masculinity in terms of power, money, and callousness. So both boys and girls are affected by this. And we want to make sure that we're speaking to boys as well as girls and not alienating anyone, but inviting them to participate as makers of their culture. So we have them deconstruct media that they're consuming. We have them look at print ads, and all throughout we ask them, from where you are, you're a 15-year-old kid, what can you do from where you are to help kind of disrupt these paradigms, disrupt the status quo. And we have this beautiful solutions mural that carries as a thread throughout our 6 lessons and collects the ideas of young people. And whether it's as simple as I can talk to my little brother about the words he uses. Let's think about the word hoe, and let's think about the word quote pimp. Like what are these words really evoking? And how can you kind of use more appropriate language? So, these young people kind of also are clear about their power on social media. They spend so much time on Snapchat and Kik and other apps that I'm constantly learning about. But how can they also use their voices as young people, like a 17-year-old or 14-year-old kid did with 17 magazine, starting a petition and urging them to be more responsible with their presentation of young women. So kind of empowering young people to use their voices, to shape media by using our media, by using Playground, has kind of helped us connect the dots. And in the end, they end up recording speeches for leaders. One group did a rap video. They're just so inspiring. By the 6th lesson, they're really ready to do something about this issue. So much so that we've created youth forums. And the next step in our curriculum process is to have young men and women on stage with the district attorneys of their states, with state legislators, with other leaders, speaking directly with them and saying, you know what, we want to do something about this issue. And so for us, this diagram represents a way in which we believe as filmmakers, a compelling story truly can act as the heart of social change. Hopefully we'll continue this cycle over and over again. So that's the work we do with Playground, and at Nest we continue to make other films that we hope inspire action. And if you allow, we'll play about a 5-minute clip from another short film we've created called Jessica's Story, which celebrates an incredible young woman in Los Angeles. Yes.
Just to say that we recognize that there is a voice disturbingly missing from our panel, and my apologies for that. All of the representatives from this community fell through for us. But it's a little unconscionable to me to have a panel about human trafficking without the voice of a trafficked survivor. And so Jessica is going to be that voice in absence of that today.
I look at the tattoo on my neck as a battle scar. It's a cover-up. There used to be a name under it. The pimp who kidnapped me, he branded me like I was his slave. A lot of our young girls today have the brandings either on their face or their neck. They're branded somewhere, or at least a few times, all over their bodies. The girls automatically see my tattoo, and it helps them to identify with me.
Jessica's story is so amazing, and when you tell people the story that she told me, they immediately say, oh, so this was in Thailand, so this was in China, so this was, and when I say, no, this was Los Angeles, this was down the street from you, this is the freeway you go through. They can't believe it. People don't feel like stuff like this happens here, and it does. It happens every day. It's happening right now. So the thing about art is, for me, I only do political subjects, things that I care about, social injustices. My motto is that art can do more than just hang. It can help. And so if some of the people down at Skid Row might even slightly identify with her story, maybe some of those women can look up at her and think, oh man, maybe I can be like her.
How I kind of always look at where my story began has been basically since I was born. My mother was a teen mom. My father left when I was still a baby. My mother was 17. I was raised by my grandparents for the most part. My grandmother did take care of me. I loved her. She was a wonderful woman. My mother came back for me when I was 3, and she had already married some other man. That's when a lot of abuse started. It started out with him sexually abusing me. Then it turned into, just to be blunt, trying to kill me. Sexual abuse started at 3, and it continued to happen till I think I was about 6. My mother and I were both being abused. My mom had a lot of different boyfriends, men that have tried to sleep with me, tried to get different sexual favors from me. Some have been forceful.
So show me why you're strong.
I was molested when I was a kid, and I've passed on other projects like this, but when I heard Jessica's story, I thought, you know, now's the time. It's important. What happened to her is important. What happened to me is important.
I was 17 years old, and I remember I had 2 long ponytails, and I was followed. They said, "Oh, you remind me of Pocahontas," and I was like, they had a gun. I was afraid. They told me not to scream or they were gonna beat the hell out of me. There were maybe in between 15 to 20 men there, and I was raped in the car all night. That's when I got branded on my neck.
When we got here this morning, someone had shit all over the wall. We need a new wall.
Yeah, I need a new wall.
We need more buckets of water. Who's hair in it? Yours? It's my hair. Oh, it smells so bad. They actually leaned against the wall and had diarrhea all over it. And then they've driven by and screamed at us and yelled at us to get out of here. Because this is a very prominent corner for drug dealing. So when we came in, we shut down business for a couple days. And so we had a couple people drive by and scream at us to go home and stuff like that. But we stood our ground.
After I was branded, the next few years, you just can't even imagine. I was snatched up, I was hogtied, put in trunks, I was pistol whipped. I had to like jump, tuck and roll out of cars. I've just gone through everything. I've been beat up, I've been raped. It was like one thing after another, and I think that's when the trauma really fully set in for me. At any moment, anybody could kill me. The pimps had girls in dog cages. They were waterboarding them. They were selling them.
The pimps had girls in dog cages?
Yes.
And were waterboarding them?
Yes. They were trying to break these girls, and they had other guys coming in, having sex with them, getting paid.
When Jessica told us her story, she said she always loved to see hummingbirds. No matter how bad things got, it would remind her of her grandmother. So we've decided to do 2 hummingbirds. This one would be her daughter, and the one up on top is her grandmother protecting her. And hopefully she'll like them.
I love hummingbirds, and I could never catch them.
Yeah.
So they're just, you know, I think they symbolize like a freedom, a certain type of freedom.
Made a wrong turn once or twice.
I got out of the life 8 years ago. I was 20. I'm 28 now. And having my daughter living with me is so amazing. I had her when I was 16, and she was taken away from me for a while, and that was really painful. But I found some balance in my life with a lot of support from my mom. My mother and I have a really wonderful, fantastic relationship now. And she's apologized to me for a lot of things that has gone on, and she's really worked on being in my life. I wouldn't have made it without the help of the Mary Magdalene Project. They offered a lot of different programs and basically kept me safe. So nobody could find me, and I think that was the biggest thing for me. I now work at helping girls leave the street life. It's really not safe out here for anyone, especially for children. A lot of the girls are anywhere from 11 on up, and sometimes even younger than that. I love my girls, each and every one, and I even write them like a letter or a personal note so they know that I'm thinking about them even when they're not here. I add stickers sometimes because, you know, even though it's something so small, like just something, the smallest things make you smile.
You like it?
I like it.
You do?
Yes. Thank you so much. I love the eyes, especially. The eyes, it says I've been through something, but it's a certain strength that's like in the eyes. And I think this is beautiful.
I'm so glad you like it.
This is great.
Dad, that hummingbird is for Mama.
God has really been good to you, baby.
Yes.
He really has.
If it wasn't for you and Mama, though, I don't know. I'm a survivor of sex trafficking, where I've overcome that. And all my girls, they will too.
Thank you so much, Libby and Nishima, for the work that you're doing. You know, one thing there's so much there and so much to digest. Yes, it's an emotional morning for many of us. But one thing I want to highlight here, representing a UN Peace Messenger organization, is this. We are here at the NGO-CSW as civil society to make our contribution and not wait for policymakers to do it for us. And that's what Libby and Nishima are doing. But one of the purposes of framing our work as NGOs in the Sustainable Development Goal conversation is so that it becomes a bridge to policymakers, so that we become their hands and feet on the ground, so that we can work together. And that's exactly what you guys have done by showing Playground in the Senate and getting the Senate to change policy, so that we can walk arm in arm and together make a difference with this. I always knew media could make a difference, but I never saw it in action until I met Sean Saudi at the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women 3 years ago. And he introduced me to Media Impact, which is in this building, and it is media that is having a profound impact. Sean, thank you for being here.
My name is Sean. I have the great pleasure of being CEO of PCI Media Impact. We're a EcoSoc 501c3. We believe in the power of stories to change the world. We're based in this building. We've been based in this building for 30 years, and I've been here for 6 years. And it's always a special period when we have all of you visit. We particularly undertake work that's called entertainment education. It's the use of drama that touches your heart. It's not hard stories. I love the hard stories, the real stories. They are a very effective way to engage people. But in some of the places we work, those first-hand narratives are really difficult to get out there. They're culturally difficult to get out there. The victims are often in a complex space of sharing and not sharing. So the complementarity of the documentary format with our story-based format, I think, reflect different ways we can engage the public in thinking about these complex issues. So we do serial dramas. We do them on radio. We do them on TV. We do them through song. We do anything that provokes a story. We work in about 40 countries around the world. We work on a complex of issues, everything from climate change to species conservation to women's empowerment to sexual and family planning. But some of my favorite work is the work we do out of Latin America. And I'm going to talk to you today about our work out of Bolivia with La Caldera, which is our anti-trafficking drama that we undertook for the last 3 years out of Bolivia. I put this slide up, it's our process slide, but I really want to just use it to reflect on that first block that is coalition building. We are fundamentally a capacity building organization. We believe in giving away the secret sauce, letting people take and use the methodologies that we do. So every production we undertake is with local partners. In this case, we worked with a wonderful group of women's-based small NGOs out of Bolivia on this work. And as we've gone through the 3 or 4 years we've now worked on this, other partners have come on board. But it started with a deep commitment to that local voice and that local capacity. That's important for many reasons. It's important because they bring the formative research to the table. They bring the real-life experience of knowing what that issue looks like in their community. It makes our stories real, makes our joint productions meaningful, it makes it touch your heart, which is how to touch people's heads. So we mentor them through the process of production, produce content. I believe, and I think my colleagues at the table believe, good content drives good conversation, and it's from conversation that change happens. Let me play you the animation now.
Lapicero azul, verde, rojo.
Simón, hola Simón. Yo ya quiero entrar a clases, por eso he venido.
¿Será que lo dejan?
Sentate aquí a mi lado.
A ver, chicos.
Todos me están mirando. Ven más cerquita, vas a hacer conmigo.
Vamos, chicos, vamos.
Sí, ¿has hablado con tu mami?
Dice que está bien.
¿Por qué tu mamá no ha ido a trabajar al mismo país que mi papá? Dice que es lleno de tiendas, de luces, y ella no quiere ir.
¡Médico! Es tan fácil. No eres legal.
Señor, parece... Dios, ¿qué hago? ¡Despierte! ¡Despierte!
Ma, mi papá está perdido. ¿Y si le ha pasado algo?
¿Y ahora? ¿Tienes hambre? Sí, pues, yo también. Solo hay cebolla, parece. Comeremos esto hasta que llegue la madrina, ¿ya? Pero tú terminate esa que ya has mascado.
Simón, ¿qué haces en la casa? ¿No has vendido?
Hola.
Hola, Canela.
Se llama Alfonso y está en la universidad. Todo se ve diferente cuando estoy con él.
Esto es para ti.
El Alfonso me gusta.
No me separaría de ti un segundo.
Apurá, Canela. Vamos, hay que volar a la terminal.
Canela.
Escuchen, su compañera Canela González ha desaparecido.
Hija, Canela no aparece. Nuestra Canela.
Te vamos a encontrar, niña. Danos las pistas. Danos las señales.
Tienes que salir de este lugar, Canela.
¿Papi?
¿Papi? Sí, soy tu papi.
No, por favor.
Vamos, señor X.
Ricardo.
Gives you a little bit of a sense of the story. As you can see, it tries to address the depth of the issue that is trafficking. It includes labor trafficking as well as sexual trafficking. It is an incredibly complex issue. The situation in Bolivia where we worked was particularly hard. Trafficking has increased 900% over the last decade. These are astronomical numbers. When you combine poverty with complex environments, you can often get these situations exacerbate quickly. There's a tradition in rural Bolivia where they send their young children into the capital, La Paz. And when you separate children from their natural parents and put them in a family-based home situation, semi-home situation, it just facilitates that type of abuse being a little more easy to happen. We started working on this work in 2012. We were very lucky to get a grant from the U.S. State Department, who's been working with us the whole time. It's an issue I know is very dear to their heart and that one they're working to overcome. We produced 21 episodes of drama, 12 minutes each, which we broadcast on 150 different radio stations in Bolivia. Now, Bolivia is one of the radio capitals of the world. It was a deep part of their culture. It was used as part of the mining industry. 150 radio stations, each with their own call-in shows. So imagine 21 episodes, 150 stations, an hour long. Think of how much conversation that is on the airways and how many conversations that provokes at home. And that's why we think it makes a difference. But we were really excited because the U.S. State Department got excited by the production and said we should take it into classrooms. And so they worked with us to produce kits for children to go across Bolivian schools. So we take the drama into the school. As I showed you, we have these guides with the episodes in the back, so it's very easy for a teacher to know what to talk about in each episode, as it talks them through some of the issues and some of the cases. But we also produced little books so that the children could draw and make real the story for them through their own creative process. We complemented that with plays in public spaces. Those of you know Latin America know that the public space culture is very rich. Now we've done this now since 2012. We've done pre and post surveys. We've had teachers write and students write. But the story I want to close with is one that really happened as the drama first went on the air. What we all aspire to is one less child times 1 million less children suffering this work. So when we heard, after we were on about episode 6 of our show, and the local community in one of the areas we were, a group of young girls were listening to the show. And they realized that one of their friends was following the path of Canela. And so they reached out to her, and they got her to talk to their parents, talk to them, and this girl decided instead of going off to La Paz and pursuing who knows what, she went back home. It's my hope that there are not one of those stories, but thousands of those stories, and if we all work together, millions of those stories. Thank you very much. We're on the 5th floor to come and visit. We love visitors.
That's how all this got started. I showed up on the 5th floor after seeing Sean present at the CSW. I want to honor that we had hoped this would be a conversation, but really, as you can imagine, as a facilitator, it's pretty hard to stop any one of these amazing speakers and cut them short. So we don't want to cut our interaction with you short, and we won't get to talk with all of you individually. My husband, a fellow co-vice president of Pathways to Peace, will be handing out around sign-up sheets. And you're hearing a lot about transmedia. So we are actually here today launching a new transmedia project, and we need the participation of other NGOs and civil society from all walks of life. So if you'd like to be in touch with us about this, we encourage you to sign up on these sign-up sheets that are going around. In this next piece, I'm just going to acknowledge of our panel, maybe in some ways the most controversial. And that is, you could see in the cartoon, the grooming that goes on, yes? Now, as we mentioned, trafficking is a very complex, multifaceted issue with many vectors of implementation. But one of the primary vectors that you've heard a lot about this morning is grooming. And so we're going to talk a little bit about grooming with someone who used to do it. The Art of War, several thousand years ago, written several thousand years ago, said, "The enemy you know becomes your ally." Yesterday it was said that until we change the perception of men and boys, we will not change the status of women in this world. I want to acknowledge that in our delegation at Pathways to Peace, half our delegation are men, and all of them are in this room, and I thank you. And one of those men has gone through a profound transformation in his life that we hope every man involved in this does. And it is, I hope you can appreciate his courage in standing in front of you. It is actually a pleasure to introduce Winston Wright. Winston, do you want to come up here? So Winston and I are going to speak together. Winston, this is the first time you've seen these clips.
That's right. Yes.
Can I tell a little bit of your story, or do you want to tell it?
You can tell.
Winston became a human trafficker at the age of 14 years old. The vector along which that happened is almost identical to the traffic victim stories that we've heard today. He was abused at home in all dimensions of his life. He was a runaway. He was without food or shelter, crying in a subway station, and it went from there. So to understand the issue of human trafficking, we have to understand why someone becomes a trafficker and know what interventions would both prevent that and rehabilitate that. And Winston, I think it's very important for all of us to establish here today how you feel now about what you did for 35 years. It took him 35 years to break free, and that's what he calls it. And his story of breaking free is an incredible one, and one that we're telling in a documentary that's in creation right now. But how do you feel about it now?
I'm sorry for what I did to the woman. I'm ashamed. trafficked a lot of women overseas and national.
Winston is, now that he's free, working diligently on his rehabilitation and also on turning his attention to helping NGOs like ours to understand this issue better and what we can do to stop it. And we really thank you for your help, Winston, because Winston has changed my understanding of what drives this. So this fairy tale that you see here, Cinderella, is one that billions of girls worldwide see. What is this story really? Every woman in this girl's life is cruel, awful, and evil. They're even called the evil stepsisters and the evil stepmother. And she prays for a man, a Prince Charming, to come and rescue her from this horrid life. And when he shows up, she has beautiful clothes and lives happily ever after. The enemy you know becomes your ally, and the enemy to our little girls is Prince Charming. And this story that is priming them for exactly the vector along which human trafficking happens. Is that a familiar story to you, Winston?
That's right. I brainwashed the women that are human trafficked. I didn't use drugs to get them, but I brainwashed them. You make them fall in love with you, and then you start taking them to the strip bars, and to the clubs where the pimps and the prostitutes hang out, so they get intrigued with the lifestyle.
We really, really want to share with you Winston's freedom and how he broke out of this cycle.
So I decided to go to Colombia. I saw a friend and I asked him, where's the strip house? He says, you'll take me to the strip house the next day. So the next day I met up with him that afternoon, and we went downtown in Bogota. As we were going to the strip bar, he said, we're gonna cut through the church. I went inside the church and I felt something in the church. And there was a lot of people praying in the church. I felt something and I started crying. I felt the Holy Spirit. And that happened in 2003. I stopped right there. I didn't get a chance to go to the strip bar. Only to make that ever again. I told the people I work for in human trafficking that I'm done with that.
And that's no small accomplishment, and we don't have time to go into it today, what it takes for a trafficker to get out. But what we need to focus on, and thank you for your vulnerability, Winston. I know this is hard, and he knows that he's speaking to many of you who wouldn't be able to forgive him, and we understand that.
I understand that.
But it's not stopped him from standing up and trying to make a difference on this issue. And the piece we're here to focus on today, because this is so complex and there's so much going on. But we have to understand that if a child, and a boy child, is never shown any love or any contact with a meaningful core value, only abuse, and then sees images like these. And I just want you all to take a moment and ask yourself, who do you think these images are targeted at? And how do you feel looking at these images? How do you think a little girl feels looking at these images? How do you think a 14-year-old runaway boy feels looking at these images? I did not have to troll the internet to make this slide. I just entered girls in advertising in Google. These are normal print ads. We have normalized the objectification of our girls and the sexualization of our girls. And that is affecting not just girls, but also boys. When we turn ourselves into two-dimensional sexualized objects and associate that with monetary value, I'm embarrassed to show you this slide. This was posted as Kim Kardashian's celebration of the International Day of Women this year on March 8th on Twitter. 60 million hits in 24 hours. That's monetizable for her. Is this not a form of trafficking? And these are girls and boys clicking on this and liking it and seeing that the value of a woman is in the sexualization and objectification of her body and not her sexuality, not her ownership of her direct experience, but her as an object to be looked at and done with what is wanted by someone else. And that conditioning is influencing not just the girls, but it's also influencing the boys, because treating women that way is glamorized. Winston looked up to statesmen when he was a child, and he was told that he was stupid and could never be one of them. So do you know who the next role model in his world was on the streets? Winston, tell us, so in your recovery, you've had to make some choices and disciplines.
Yes, I had to not look at the internet, because if I look at the internet, I see pornography, I'll go into pornography. I had to stop going to the strip bars, and the music is that's the main one. Thank you, the music.
So what music do you listen to now, Winston?
Doris Day.
When he goes to the gym to work out, he has to wear Doris Day in his headphones, so he's not indoctrinated by the music they play at the gym. This is what our media is doing. And this is the impact. Terry Crews, who is a famous NFL star and now a television actor, has come online to speak this truth. When we objectify ourselves as two-dimensional images in media, we come to see each other as body parts and objects for use. Is this not how we're also exploiting our planet? We stop seeing each other as human beings to love. And imagine what that does to a little boy's mind who has never experienced love. If we're going to heal human trafficking, we have to address this issue, and we are engaging in a project that will touch the Winstons of our world, hopefully before the traffickers can script them. Winston, is there anything else you want to say?
I'm really sorry. And I want to help to try to stop this human trafficking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Research that was done by Albert Bandera in the 1960s showed us that children emulate exactly what they see on TV. They did a study with a Bobo doll. Half the children saw an adult on TV punch the Bobo doll, and half the children saw an adult on TV hug the Bobo doll. And guess what the children did when they were allowed into the room where the Bobo doll was after they watched what the adult did on TV? What did they do? They emulated what the behavior they saw in media. It is our social responsibility to begin to fill the airwaves with positive interactions between men and women that show us our humanity, connect us to our loving capacity at heart, and to model new possibilities and new dynamics of interaction and behavior. And that is exactly what our next speaker, Tess Cacciatore, is doing through her work at the Gwen Network and a film that she is releasing this week, Road to Redemption. Welcome.
It all began with a globe, and I traced my fingers along the many countries and oceans that bind us all.
Senator's daughter saves lives in Africa.
My name is Davo. We're happy to have you here.
Nigeria.
Let's tend to the patients.
Sardaunan gwamba a gaishe ka, baba ya dan Abdu, mai mulki dan mai mulki.
Our community has been struck by a great affliction. Our women cannot provide us men folk with children.
They have the cause.
13.
Pregnant at 13.
Women here marry very young.
I am cursed.
Jemima was caught in bed with another man.
This poor girl is not cursed. She's sick. So for just $300, she can be healthy?
This is a place for sick people, not for sinners.
The girl's in the tent. This is fistula. These girls are too young to have children. Please, take me with you. These children are your wives? If your children cannot speak, speak for them.
You came here to fulfill your dreams and fantasies. You're not one of us.
I just saw a man get murdered. I can't deal with this.
She is a bad woman. She brings only death with her.
I had no idea what I was fighting.
Our culture has been around for hundreds of years.
There is any sense in what she says.
You cannot expect it to change overnight.
Your father's United States Senator, Samantha.
My being here is ruining my father's chances of re-election. You've come to fix things, or should I say me.
And who are you to question the elders?
Maybe you should ask yourselves, what's worse, running away or staying and doing nothing? I need to get back to Lagos. These people need you.
You have brought nothing but shame and trouble to this community.
Obviously don't know what I'm doing.
She came to offer her medical expertise, not question the traditions of our people.
She's here as a volunteer.
I don't even know what I'm doing here.
The doctor knows best.
If you do not change, we will stop laying in the bed of our husbands.
Must we be so stubborn about this?
GWEN stands for Global Women's Empowerment Network, and we're transforming lives beyond abuse. It's a very emotional topic for us all, so forgive me if I have to breathe a lot through this. As Sheva knows, I can talk for hours about this topic, and many others about the atrocities that are going on in the world. So I had to write down my thoughts so I could stay within the time limit. So last Wednesday I received a newsletter. It's one that comes out to the Hollywood industry to let people know what's going on. And most of the time I delete the newsletter because it has stuff that I don't really care about. It's a lot of fluff and a lot of reality TV. But this one morning I clicked on a link and it was about a new series called The Underground. I'm not sure if you've seen it yet, but it's on TNT, and it's about the Underground Railroad. It's about people being freed from slavery. And the trailer jolted me down memory lane. I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, and I was obsessed with this historical hero of mine, this amazing woman by the name of Harriet Tubman. I realized at a very young age how the telling of a story could impact millions of people, especially when telling the story about how one woman made an impact in the world. This memory tied all my loose ends together. It made me realize that the work I do has always been about shattering the silence and giving a voice to the voiceless by finding a new way of freedom. Being a white girl from the Midwest, I knew everything about freedom without even really truly knowing what freedom was. I was just simply free. I wasn't at risk of being sold off by my parents to an old man down the street for marriage. According to UNICEF, 15 million girls will be married off before the age of 18. At that age, I could have been at risk of being trapped by the pretend love of a man much older than me, who would lure me from my home by showering me with gifts and while making me feel safe. I could have been forced into sex slavery. But thank God this did not happen to me. But what about the 4.5 million people who are victims of sexual exploitation? Trapped inside of the $99 billion industry. How can we crack this globally tied, low-risk, high-gain code? These perpetrators are not going to give up on their money so easy and walk away. The sad truth is, a great number of these men who run this industry are most likely abused and forced into this life as well, much like Winston's story. Neither side knowing that the other side are victims, led by the past generations that date back before time began. How can we collectively in this room break the cycles of abuse? CNN has produced a show, as Chev mentioned, called Sex Trafficking, the Horror and the Hope. They state that sex trafficking can be ended. Awareness is the first step. A light bulb came on to me and I said, this is my driving passion, to produce and direct films, series, and projects that have to do with bringing awareness and creating transformation for myself and hopefully for others. I realized that through my career I was drawn to producing films and projects that weren't necessarily mainstream, but came grassroots efforts that modeled new forms of social behavior and could tell a story that led us through a positive social change and integration of the spirit due to the written and spoken word. I wanted to be part of telling better stories and be a part of true inspiration. Why the film Age Redemption? The story is about a young woman who is in search of her own redemption. The character of Samantha resonated with me because I had to learn many ways of how to work through various cultures, respecting their cultural differences, much like Samantha had to do in Nigeria. Samantha was eventually able to work with the young chief in the village to discuss issues like child marriage, another statistic that needs to change. Sometimes child marriage is forced in culture, and sometimes it's tied to being sold young girls into marriage. They're then forced into sex slavery. Knowing the statistics, that there's 20 countries that still allow for men to marry young girls, drives me to continue to promote films like Road to Redemption, because it inspires younger generations of women to learn how to support other women and girls to find ways to change laws, much like what Libby and Shima are doing. Congratulations on your work. Knowing that 603 million women still live where violence is not a crime, that keeps me up at night wondering where we went wrong in our lives and how I could personally continue to work towards a change. My personal mission is a global change through the power of storytelling. I believe that through combining grassroots efforts in the technology and entertainment industries with the NGO arena, the driving force of the United Nations and world leaders like President Mahama of Ghana and President Buhari of Nigeria, who are working to change the laws in their own countries. They're looking to illegalize child marriage. It's countries like that and all of us together to produce films like Road to Redemption and another film that Chev will be telling you about next. Through this, we can shatter the silence and give a voice to the voiceless. I believe it's then that we can truly create a lasting accomplishment of gender equality, race equality, and paint a new face of freedom. And this is for the sake of our humanity.
I really love this last slide, and I know you're not supposed to read slides, but this one bears reading. What is technology without humanity? And I am so pleased to introduce you to our final panelist today, who is not only responding to that question, but from inside the media world at the height of it, bringing humanity back to technology. Fred Fuchs is a very dear friend who worked with Francis Ford Coppola at Zoetrope Films, worked at the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and is now working with us. Aren't we lucky? Thank you, Fred.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm very honored to be with all of you today. And before I begin, I just wanted to recognize for a moment all the men who are in the audience today. And we all know if we're going to start to build a better society and a solution to this incredible problem we have, we need the men and the women working together. And before I talk to you about Operation Big Sister, we all just need to recognize that there is a problem, and how much longer are we going to allow this male-dominated media culture to continue to perpetuate this myth that gender inequality is the humanity's natural condition. We all know it's not. And we all know we're entering a new age. The earth is changing, humanity has to evolve. And we all know that this is now the age of Aquarius. And that until we find that balance between the masculine and feminine energy, between male and female empowerment, we will never achieve peace on this planet. And that's got to be the goal for all of us. So yes, I've been in the media industry for 35 years. I've produced big entertainment Hollywood studio films. I've worked as a network executive at a public broadcaster in Canada. And I'm very, very conscious of the power of media and that how we found, we all want to criticize the media for being this horrible thing. It's desensitizing our children to violence and sex and the implementation now and the access to media and cell phones and pornography, where any 6-year-old can just click on his cell phone and access all forms of pornography. It's just, we have no idea what that impact is going to have to another generation. And we've got to create a world now where we have conscious creators who are consciously creating media, and we have conscious consumers who recognize that there is an impact on what they're consuming. And we have to have conscious parenting and parents who recognize they have a real responsibility in terms of what type of media their children are consuming. But I'm here really to talk about a very exciting project I'm so excited to be involved in, that Sheva introduced me to, and it's called Operation Big Sister. And the inspiration, of course, is a true story of this very courageous group of women in Iceland, who you'll hear more about, who saw a problem, decided not to just sit by and let it perpetuate, but to organize and get up and do something about it. And when I heard this story, I said to myself, this is an opportunity to do a very big, entertaining feature film. Because it had all the elements of great drama that we always look for in feature films. And it had great humor, and great characters, and a great inspirational ending as well. And that's where we began. So we optioned the rights to these women's story, and we developed a feature script, and we want to use this feature film to bring a spotlight to this story. And I refer to Spotlight because, as some of you might know, there has recently been a film called Spotlight about the horrible story of what went on in Boston with the Catholic priests and the abuse of these children for all these years. And we also know that the success of that film, including winning the Academy Award, has now brought about a huge change, not just in terms of the media, but thousands of men who were abused are now coming out and feeling free to tell their story, which they could not talk about. So there's something about how this media and how this story can empower people that was very exciting to me. But of course, we want to do more than just do a feature film. We know that the feature film will be a way to reach people about this horrific story of sex trafficking who may not watch a documentary, who may not go to an online website, who may not be open, because this is a very, emotionally scary subject. And a lot of people just aren't equipped to even listen to this story. But if we do this in an entertaining way, and it's presented properly, we think we can reach a large audience about this subject. And we're hoping we can attract them, create an emotional experience, and create a door that then they want to step through to learn more. And that's why concurrently we're producing this documentary. And we're actually here with a film crew this week, shooting interviews, talking to people, finding out other stories of other people who are doing great work in this field, dealing with this subject. And their stories will all become part of this documentary. Then the last part, of course, is the digital educational platform. because we'll also be creating other ancillary content, which will then provide real tools to people working in the field to help with education and awareness. And it'll be a virtuous circle, because each of these different media forms will support the other ones as well. So this is our dream, this is our goal. We're really at the beginning. We need everybody's love and support and help. And you guys are all one of the first to hear about it. And we're very excited to be able to introduce more of this to you. But this is very much Sheba's story. So please join me, Sheba, because I want you to tell about how it all first came into your life.
Well, and the truth is it's not my story. We'll get to that in a moment. So, I attended my first commission on the status of women 3 years ago. Sitting in these rooms that you're sitting in today, this is the launch point for you. 10 days into it, and we'll see how you feel on the 23rd for those who are sticking it out the whole time. 10 days into my first commission on the status of women, being a middle-class white girl that came here, very highly educated, thinking we had gender equality. And I should be embarrassed to tell you that, but instead of being embarrassed to tell you that, I decided to make a feature film that would let other people like me, in our educated ignorance, know the real that's going on. And what inspired that moment was that on my 10th day here, I was so depressed. You can relate. Those of you who've been here before, you know what I was going through. The facts, the figures, the issues. Meeting after meeting, being bombarded by the true information when I had lived in the illusion. I couldn't get off my chair to go to, the CSW handbook. It circled all the things I wanted to go see. The last day, I just sat at the Salvation Army on the pew and I couldn't move. I was in a stupor. And so I didn't move, and I'm so glad I didn't. Because into that room and onto that stage for the next panel walked a woman that created for me a defining moment of my life, a defining moment of love and empowerment. And she stood there, and I have a terrible Icelandic accent. But she said, "Enough! In Iceland, women don't just sit around whining about these things. We get up off the couch and do something about it." And she proceeded to tell me the story of Operation Big Sister. That in Iceland, women fought for 10 years to pass legislation that would decriminalize women whose bodies were being sold so that they could get access to social services. We have to acknowledge that prostitution is the only crime in which the victims of the crime are labeled criminal. Women fought to decriminalize women and criminalize the buyers and sellers of sex. And I heard Winston say on camera to me in front of the United Nations yesterday that he believes he should have gotten a much longer sentence when he went to prison. That would have made a difference. And Icelandic women passed legislation to make that happen. But when they did and celebrated with champagne, as only the big sisters know how to do, the next thing that happened is the chief of police in Iceland got on TV and said, prosecute prostituters, buyers of sex? Prostitution is the oldest profession in the world. We're not going to waste our time doing anything about that, and besides, we don't have any money. When the Icelandic women went into action and took matters into their own hands, and Gudrun Jónsdóttir of Iceland partnered with a young graduate student at Stigmat, Iceland's Rape and Sexual Violence Crisis Center, and together they said, all right, if the normal vectors of change aren't going to work right now, we have to innovate. So they took out ads, online and in print media, just like the traffickers do. Why not? If they can, we can. Selling themselves. And when men called to buy sex, they said, "This is your big sister watching you." And this grew through what the Icelandic women call the jungle telegraph. kitchen table to kitchen table. It spread virally, and women who didn't even know each other started doing it. And pretty soon, it was a movement. 85 women and more. This is your big sister watching you. Successfully destabilized the buying and selling of sex in Iceland because men, when they called to buy sex, didn't know if they would get instead their mother, or their wife, or their sister, or their girlfriend on the phone. And because their anonymity was their power, when they held a press conference and marched the names of the men who had called them to buy sex and their phone numbers and information to the police chief's desk, they wore neon burqas to protect their anonymity, to perpetuate their Operation Big Sister. They did other amazing antics too, like sending the men to the police chief's house for services. Since he didn't have the money to investigate, it was very helpful. And of course, they had to come up with a clothing line. We're very excited in the feature film about them for our merchandising. That's an important part of Hollywood, right, friend? So we will model after the Big Sisters merchandising. I am responsible boxer shorts. Which I hear the mayor of Reykjavik and now the previous police chief, who was against them in the beginning, proudly wear. This is what we're about. We're about creating conscious creation, but also making new choices about the media we consume. And the Big Sisters empowered a pattern interrupt across their entire nation to wake men up to what they're consuming, and to wake women up to what we're consuming and change that. The power of media is something we're marinating in all the time. Imagine if little girls heard the Big Sister story as their fairy tale instead of Cinderella. Media affects the behaviors. We role model after media. And it currently is portraying shocking objectification of all of us. And we can change that. It has been the poison. We are a stand today with the Big Sisters that it's going to be the antidote. And as the antidote, that we can tell these amazing stories, these true stories of real people making a real difference in the world and inspire others to do the same. This is also the story of the trafficked survivors. And we're ending on this slide. I have a whole new appreciation for the color of the sky, because when you're in bondage, everything is gray. I suggest to all of you here, traffic survivors are not the only one in bondage. Our minds are in bondage when we are enslaved to the media. And we can change that by choosing what we consume and choosing to create a new demand for new conscious production. Finally, I just have to say, the Big Sister story is not my story, but I'm privileged that that story changed my life, and we hope it changes millions of others. The Big Sister story is the Big Sister story. Good.
Thank you. So, okay. Well, I was not prepared to speak, but that's true. Sarah, we met 3 years ago, and she wrote to me afterwards, and I always thought, she must be princess. And whenever I was looking for signs that she had to be crazy, she did something incredible, just like today. And she has been making things happen. I still can't believe it, what we did at my kitchen table when I was trying to convince the buyers that I was 32 and she took over. It's amazing. Thank you for all this, and the best of luck.
Thank you all. I hope you sign your name on our sign-up sheet, because we need every person possible to partner with us in this movement. Everyone can be a big sister, even the men in the